Today we're going to make a graph using the online Excel program. So I'm going to be working with column A and column B. Column A is going to be the variable that goes on your x-axis. So this is your independent variable, which for today's activity is voltage because the scientist was controlling the voltage. So in A1, I want you to write voltage. We also need to make sure to include our units. In this case, it's volts, which you can just put a lowercase v in parentheses. Then we're going to go ahead and click on box B1. That's going to be our y-axis variable, which in this case is distance. So that's the distance that the box moved, and that was measured in centimeters. Now you'll notice that this box went over the edges of the B column. So you can come up here to the letter B, and if you hover right at its border, my cursor changes into kind of a double arrow line there. I can click and drag it to resize it so that it can fit the entire title there. A was also a little cramped, so I'm going to do the same thing, make that slightly bigger. Now you can see the titles that I want for my data. Now the voltages we were working with, we had started with 2 volts, 3 volts, and then 4. Distances, when it was 2 volts, the box didn't move, so that was 0 centimeters. At 3 volts, it moved 8 centimeters, and at 4 volts, it moved 21. So I enter that data. Now this was a very quick activity, so we only have 3 sets of data points. I'm going to click where it says 21, and then I'm going to click and drag to highlight the entire table. And I want to make it look more like a table that we would normally see. But first I want to make it look nicer. So we're going to center everything. So that option's right up here. So we're going to click on center. Then I'm going to go up here to the insert tab. I'm going to click insert. And I want to turn it into a table. So I'm going to click on table. When I do that, this little box pops up. I'm just going to click OK. All right, now it looks like a nice table. I'm going to click on 21 again and highlight the entire table because now I want to create a graph. So I'm going to come over here to scatter. I want to make a scatter plot, but I want it to have lines, so I'm basically making a line graph. I'm going to come down to this one. I'm going to click on that so that when I hover over it, it says scatter with straight lines. I'm going to click on that. It gives me a graph. Okay? Now this graph needs some work. It's not perfect yet. So I am going to either, if I'm on a Chromebook, I'm going to take my first 2 fingers and I'm going to tap them at the same time in order to bring up a menu. Or if I'm on a traditional laptop or a desktop computer, I can right click. And that's going to bring up this menu. I'm going to click on Format. When I click on Format, I can change the title of my graph. So the title of your graph should be Y versus X. Y versus X. So in this case, we can leave distance. Your units don't need to appear in your title. So I'm going to write distance versus voltage. And if you want to change the font, you can do so down here. I'm going to leave it alone to make it easy. All right, and you can see that that changes over here as we go. Now you'll also notice that there's all this empty space in this graph. That is not a good graph. You don't want a lot of empty space in your graph. So I'm going to come down here to horizontal axis. I'm going to click to open up the options. And let's see, bounds 0 to 4. So I want to start this at 2 because there's nothing happening between 0 and 2. So I'm going to start at 2. And then I'm also going to change this to 4. So all of our values fell between 2 and 4. So now you see that my graph is really stretched out, and that's perfect because it allows the viewer to easily see the data, see trends in the data, really analyze the graph. All right, so I'm going to leave the rest of it. I'm just going to click on that to close that menu, makes it easier. The y-axis I think is okay. It stops a little short of that 25, but since our increments are in 5, I think that's fine. So now we've eliminated all that extra space in our graph, so that looks great. So now I can close this. I'm still missing some information in this graph though. We need labels and we need units. So in order to do that, I am going to click on my chart so it's highlighted. I'm going to click on this table up here. So all I did was click on my graph and then I clicked on this word chart and it gives me some options. I want axis titles. So first I'm going to work on my horizontal axis or my x-axis, and I want to click on title below axis. And then you're simply going to type it in the text box. So I'm going to label this voltage, and I need my units. That's super important on a graph. If you don't have units, then you're not communicating everything completely. So this is in voltage. I could write the word out, voltage. I'm just going to put its symbol, which is a lowercase v, in parentheses, and click OK. And you'll see that show up there. But I also need one to explain what's going on the y-axis. So again, I'm going to go to axis titles. I am going to click on the primary vertical axis, which is the y-axis, and then you'll make a decision. I like to go with this rotated title. And again, you're just going to type it in. In this case, it's going to be distance, and we are measuring distance in centimeters for today's activity. All right, so now I have a title, I have labels, I have units on both of my labels, I have great increments, my data is nice and stretched out, there's no wasted space in my graph. This is a really well done graph.